Should you buy in a HOA community with a single family home? In today's video, we're going to cover some things that you're going to want to know about. And if you stick around to the end, we're going to cover the most important thing you should be aware of if you're buying in a neighborhood with an HOA.
All right, if this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in the greater Portland metro area, make sure you click the subscribe button, tap that notification bell.
Do a little dance?
Yeah, do a little dance. And then you'll be the first to know about everything happening in the greater Portland metro area.
I'm Ann Stewart. This is Erica Hagfors. We work together to make sure that you make a smooth move to the Portland metro area. All of our contact information is in the description below, so do not be shy. Don't hesitate. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you, and let's get on a call. All right, in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 things that you need to be aware of if you're going to buy in a neighborhood that has an HOA. And if you do stick around to the end, we're going to cover the most importante thing.
So important.
Yeah, so the first one is what, Erica?
First one is the general scope of an HOA. So here in Oregon, we got a lot of options when it comes to the scope of an HOA.
Yes, we do.
You have your kind of planned community or more involved HOA that is run by a property management company. Those are generally going to be the ones that are out there telling you that you've left your garbage cans out for too long, or you can't paint your house that color, or you need to move that junker car.
They're more organized.
That's a real polite way of saying it. But yes, they're going to have more rules, regulations that are enforced.
Yeah.
And then
there's actually a company getting paid to enforce.
Yes, exactly. And then you're going to have kind of, and we usually find those in the newer communities, usually by bigger builders. They all have HOAs.
And you're typically paying more per month because you got to cover the cost of the management.
Exactly. And then you have kind of on the opposite scope of that, the smaller stuff from the older homes. And those are sometimes like usually managed by the neighborhood or you know, people who are elected to positions of power. I'm sorry. And you know, and you have but it's real low key. You know, maybe there's a sign that's being taken care of.
Or it could not be. You might have that one person that's going to make everyone go to task.
Generally, there's less going on with that HOA. And so there's kind of the dichotomy of like a full range of options in between where it makes it very important to understand what the scope of your HOA is and how much control do they have or how many rules and regulations do they have.
Do you like someone telling you what to do? Well, number 2 is someone's going to probably tell you what to do. There's going to be enforceable things that the neighborhood can enforce, whether it's managed by a company or managed by the neighborhood. So you want to read through the CC&Rs, the bylaws, the meeting minutes, all the things to make sure you fully understand what it is they could ask you to do.
And also like what you can do to your home. So while we all think that we're buying homes and we can do whatever we want with them, if you have an HOA, they can kind of dictate what you're allowed to do.
Maybe the type of roof you put on. Maybe the color of the house that you have. Maybe how many cars you're allowed to park.
Additions that you may want to do to the home. Some HOA committees have what's called an ARC, an Architectural Review Committee. And that dictates also, like Ann said, if you can paint your house certain colors, if you can do additions, how they look, front and back. So all of these things, again, it goes into the scope of your HOA, but understanding what can they tell you, what you can do with your house is going to be super important because you may think, oh, well, I'm going to buy this house and I'm going to do this remodel and it's going to change the exterior this way. And they may say, no, I don't think that we like that. That doesn't fit.
Or they might want you to change your plans as you're drafting them.
Or they may say, well, it's great color, but we don't want it in our neighborhood because we want to maintain this, you know, more natural palette. So truly understand, what do you have to take to an architectural review committee? If you have one, what is the scope of this HOA? What can they tell you to do or not to do? All right, so here's your like educational nugget for the day. The difference between CC&Rs and bylaws, rules, and regulations. So CC&Rs are going to be associated with even neighborhoods that don't have an HOA, but almost all neighborhoods that have an HOA are also going to have CC&Rs. And those are covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And so CC&Rs are generally enforceable by somebody in your neighborhood getting real upset and taking you to like a small claims court. That's how those are enforced. And, you know, in this day and age, I people are just a little bit more particular sometimes. So, that could happen. If somebody got upset enough and you are parking your RV, somewhere and they don't like it, or it's not technically allowed in the CCNRs. And it's really important. CCNRs will pop up on the prelim title report. When you receive that, when you're going through the buying process, make sure you click that link. Again, read through these. A lot of times they are not necessarily enforced in neighborhoods, but they can be.
Yeah.
If somebody truly got upset, they might be able to take you to court and say, hey, they're parking their boat, their RV, whatever the situation is that technically doesn't follow the neighborhood. And even if you want to roll the dice and say, like, I think it's going to be okay because I see 15 RVs in the neighborhood, at least that that's a potential and that you're choosing to make that, decision.
I was going to add something really important.
Yeah, do it.
HOAs. Let's say you decide you're not going to pay it or you fall behind. Did you know they can actually foreclose on your house when you don't pay your HOAs? And HOAs never go away. That means you can't just move out, move away, and say, yeah, I didn't pay the last 6 months. They can come after you, file judgments, and take you to court. HOAs are as bad as IRS tax liens. They will follow you forever, so don't think you can get behind and they go away, or even file bankruptcy.
Or you may have to pay it off at closing.
Well, you have to pay it off at closing, but let's say that you're living in your house and you haven't paid your HOA dues for a few years. They can come after you. So understand those HOAs. You can't be passive about it.
No. And so then the opposite, you have the bylaws of the HOA, bylaws, rules, regulations. And so the bylaws are what they can enforce with penalty.
Yeah.
So HOAs can impose monetary fines on you or other fines, however they choose to, but truly understand that. So anything that's in like the bylaws, those are things that they can enforce, like I said, with money or fines or punishment of some sort versus the CCNRs, which is where you would have to go to court. So just something to think about, understanding those differences, those little nuances, very important when you're buying a home.
Great pro tip. All right, number 3 is it keeps uniformity. We all want to buy a property that doesn't go downhill or the neighborhood goes downhill after you buy it. And we have seen where there is no HOA enforced or no HOA at all in neighborhoods where it does kind of start to get tired looking, or a lot of people start just not taking care of their landscaping or whatnot. And so on some level, you have to respect the idea of an HOA, and some are run really, really well because you can drive around the neighborhood and everybody's taking care of their stuff. It's just when it goes a little too far over to the restriction that people start having real issues with it. But in general, you kind of want a sense that if you had to enforce something because a neighbor was starting to paint their house bright purple or they had 15 cars in their landscaping, or there was a neighbor that was maybe having non-domestic pets running around, things like that is where this really comes into handy, because let's be honest, it's wild, wild west. People want to own and do what they want with their houses, and we're big believers in that to some extent. But when you're in a neighborhood, you might be subject to some of the rules that keep it from getting out of hand. And so there is an upside to having an HOA.
I think at the heart of HOAs, it really does have a good, essence. I mean, the idea being that you can keep everybody's investment on the up and up. There's nothing worse than driving into a neighborhood and realizing there's a person who hasn't, mowed their lawn or hasn't done any weeding, hasn't done general upkeep on their house, because while it's not just an eyesore, it's also bringing kind of that overall impression of the neighborhood down.
And also, we sell houses where people live across the street or just to the right or left of them where they're not keeping up their houses, and it hurts their property value.
Yeah,
because if you have a neighbor that is just junkyard central, that will decrease your property value.
The other thing, is you think about the overall comfort and use of your home. So, I appreciate there are a lot of people who want to work from home or run businesses out of their properties, but HOAs can prevent, your neighbor from being able to run a fleet of heavy trucks or, park their semi-truck that they drive. Nothing wrong with it. It's a great profession. You totally understand. However, you may just not want that coming into your neighborhood, at odd hours,
and then
or
you have
being
something
parked
to
on the
enforce
street.
it.
And so, there is a balance. Yeah, I just recently sold a property, a small acreage property, and, there is a small HOA. The cost is very low. They don't really want to have a lot of input necessarily, but they do want to keep these small acreage plots looking nice for everybody. So, even though you would assume that people are small acreage, probably have an RV, they want them to be kind of out of sight, out of mind. They want everybody's landscaping to still look nice. And I will say that when you drive into that neighborhood, even though these homes are 30 years old, everything looks pristine. It is a beautiful neighborhood. And some people that's important to people. Yep. And it is. I mean, these homes are selling in the, low $1 million range, low to mid. And so, it's not all bad when it comes to HOAs. They really do have good intentions at heart. I think it's just how is it executed. So something to keep in mind if aesthetics of your home, the aesthetics of your neighbors' homes are important, then an HOA may be for you. You may want to seek out homes that are in an HOA.
Yep. All right, number 4 is money. So obviously an HOA is going to cost you monthly, quarterly, half bi-yearly, or yearly, depending on the type of HOA. Usually HOAs go up, and sometimes it goes up just a little bit depending on maybe the landscaper's cost to do business is going up, so they're transferring that to the HOA, which inevitably is going to be spread out to the homeowners, or maybe they have a lot of things they cover. I mean, obviously the more an HOA covers, like we know some HOAs that even cover the cost of your internet.
Yeah.
So if they cover, your front yard, landscaping, sometimes and the watering.
Exactly. I was going to say the watering to keep everything
all that
looking
is subject to
front.
going up. So if you see an HOA and it's $100 a month, well, maybe in a year from now it's $115 a month. So just understand that HOAs can go up just like property taxes can. Now, shouldn't go up too much if they're not covering all that much. But in general, they don't typically go down. And, that's just something to factor in for your budgeting costs. So if you're kind of squeezing into a house and that HOA goes up even a little bit and that's too hard for you, you might want to not consider it. But you might also understand that, hey, if they're covering the cost of watering and landscaping, that's a cost you don't have to take on. And that can really be a benefit. So just be aware that the cost of an HOA can go up. And it can be...
And it varies.
It varies.
I mean, so like, the HOAs that maybe aren't doing as much, or maybe there's just a sign that they're still taking care of, those may be anywhere from $5 to $30 a month. And then, like Ann said, for the more involved HOAs who are actually taking care of like common space or parks, pools, those type of things, you're going to be looking at somewhere between $50 to $150, if not maybe a little bit more a month on these detached homes. All right, so since you have stuck around to the end and stayed with us, we're going to give you a little bonus one. So
this is important.
This is super important, actually. When you are buying a house, the HOA is a contingency. So we want you to be able to understand what you're buying into. It's not just the house at this point. It's also
not just stuck with it once you write a contract.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times HOAs, you don't get the information up front. It's just how it is here in Oregon, depending on what you're buying, but they want to get that information right as soon as you go under contract. So just know you will have a period of time with which to review all the documentation associated with the HOA. It's going to tell you what the rules, regulations, bylaws are for the community, any like CC&Rs that also might be associated with the community, which we'll kind of talk about the difference between those two. Any penalties that you could face if you aren't meeting the expectations of the HOA. And it's going to be dry. It's not going to be fun to read through. It's a little bit confusing sometimes. This would be a point at which if you had some serious questions or like very big concerns, you might even employ the help of a lawyer to truly understand. But knowing what you're buying into, reading through this documentation, having a thorough understanding of what is allowed and not allowed with this property that you're going to buy, super, super important. And you have the period to do it. So take advantage of that.
It's kind of like a home inspection for the HOA. You get to read through all this stuff and make sure you understand it. Make sure you understand what it is you're buying into so that you don't move in and go, oh, they aren't going to let me have my pet pig in my yard or
or I can't
RV.
have chickens. Like understanding. I mean, chickens are a big thing right now. And so understanding, is that something I can do in this community or is that something I can't do? Can I do the remodel that I maybe want to do or 5 years down the road? Just having that knowledge so that you don't get a big surprise later on, especially if you have some plans going into the house, then it's important. It's doing your research to truly understand the scope of what you're going to be able to do, because like we said, somebody can tell you what to do with this property, not just yours.
Well, thanks for sticking around to listen to the things that you should be aware of if you're going to buy into a neighborhood with an HOA. If you think we missed something, if you have a comment, if you even have a story drop it below. We would love to hear from you. We always appreciate your feedback, and we will see you on the next video. Bye.